Welcome to Dynamic Duos. I'm Tiffany Crivelli. Today's episode will explore comic writing through the lens of a seasoned comic creator, as well as someone who's just starting their journey into comic writing. We're happy to have Phil Jimenez and Scott Hoffman join us. Scott is known in the world of music as the co-founder of Scissor Sisters, but now he's made his comics debut with his series Nostalgia, drawn by Daniel Jaget and published by ComiXology Originals. Scott isn't stopping there. This week, his new series WAG is launching with artist Juan Bobillo. Scott has been working with mentor and comic icon Phil Jimenez. Phil is a well-known artist, having drawn countless comics and fan-favorite characters. More recently, he lent his talents to the DC Black Label book Wonder Woman Historia, written by Kelly Sue DeConnick. Sit back as these two talk about the industry, the process of writing, criticism, and so much more on this profound episode of Dynamic Duos.
Hi, how are you?
It's been so long.
It's been, 10 minutes?
Since we texted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it's good to hear your voice and it's good to see you.
Likewise. We usually do the visual once a week, but it doesn't always happen.
No, so this is actually, it's a nice treat.
Good. Likewise.
Yeah. It's funny, we agreed to do this, and then I was thinking a lot about our chat in San Diego and how good that was and how much I learned about you, which is funny. I've known you for a really, really long time, like I think 20 some odd years. And there was all this wonderful stuff. Kind of curious. My mind's swirling with a bunch of things about music and comics and all this kind of stuff and horror movies and whatever. But something I actually wanted to talk to you about was the joy of writing, kind of like leaping right into it, because you and I were texting today and last night about how good it feels.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why. I just wanted to talk to you about that, about like what that sensation is.
I know why, because we get excited by writing, and kind of like, I guess that rare, I don't know if it's like rare for everyone, but there is kind of like, it's joyful, it's fun, but there's a lot of challenge in it. And then there's that moment of just like, God, I really remember why I wanted to do this. And I wanted to do it for a long time. But it just kind of flashes in moments of just like, wow, I feel like I'm living with these characters, or I feel like I'm doing something that is gonna make someone feel something, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that why we do it? I don't know why. Is there just compulsion? I don't know.
I think it's all of it. I'm certainly compelled to do it. The thing I'm working on right now, like, allows me to feel, right? So I think that's a lot of the conversations.
Sorry, I was going to say that's a lot of the conversations we have. Is you talking about this project and saying, I discovered something. I hit this emotional moment that I didn't realize I was going to approach or whatever, and that's super exciting.
It's super exciting, and the stuff that it makes me look back on a lot of the work that I've been doing, a lot of the work I've done over the past 30 some odd years, and my favorite stuff, which all had emotional resonance to me. It all meant something to me, but particularly, I discovered something about myself, and this sounds so cliche, like in a like a call or podcast about writing, but it's really true. Like yesterday, I was so excited to read our text exchange because you were talking about how joyful it was, like this work that you were doing, and I was in the same zone. Exactly, I was so happy.
Yeah, well, that's part of why I wrote you, because I remember you were having the same kinds of the same moments, and just like that discovery, or that like that eureka moment with like, oh, I've been hacking away at this thing, and then like, oh, I think I understand what it is now.
And I think what I'm excited about with you is that, so I've been, we've been now doing this we've been working together in our little group for like 3 years. You're published, and I mean, and I could talk forever, and I might, about how amazing it was to watch you learn how to work in this medium. I've never, ever, ever seen anyone do the work like you. I've told you that a million times. I've said it publicly. It's really astounding to see what you did and what you've accomplished.
I appreciate that.
But I know that there were trouble. Like, oh, it's 100%. Like, I talk about you all the time because I'm in awe of your dedication to learning the craft, right?
And we're going to flip this, by the way, this time, for me to also understand about you as a mentor, which we're not going to avoid as well, but because we didn't get there in San Diego. But go.
But the thing that I wanted to just address, so to all you listening, Scott is just been an extraordinary student of the medium, of how this crazy thing called comics works, and it's been awe-inspiring to see. I've never seen anyone do the work like you did. But it was a hard trajectory. There was a lot of doubt, is my experience with you, as I think all newcomers are to work. But what's really neat to me about the exchanges that we've been having recently is the joy that you talk about. Because it's stripped of I think the initial doubt that you had on this a couple of years ago, where you're like, is this any good? And it felt like work and labor and whatever. And this just feels like you're having fun, and that makes me very happy.
I am. And I think like one thing that's maybe interesting about the dynamic for you, and maybe this is why you enjoy this, is that I'm doing it from a place of learning, of never having experienced I shouldn't say never, like never having experienced writing in this style or comic writing at all, only just being a fan of the medium. But having done other things, that I went through that discovery, like my music career, and then moved on to a place where I kind of felt like, oh, I think I know what I'm doing now. I kind of like get it. Not that I felt that I had really, gotten to a level that I could coast, but like I did get it. And then to be in this moment where it's completely new and there are new challenges and all the new fun stuff that comes with that. And you're not in that place. You're in a different place. You're in a very, I'm going to say, esteemed place in what you do in the business. And you have a very clear idea of what you like doing, what you want to do, what your vision is, what works for you, all those things. So it's been nice for me. I think what you're seeing is someone discovering things for the first time that you haven't looked at for the first time in a long time.
Yes, 100%. The interesting thing, I would be curious about your feelings about this with music. So I'm coming at this from like an esteemed place because I've been around for a long time, but there were chunks of time the past 10 years, I would say pre-Wonder Woman Historia, where I was just like, what am I even doing in this business anymore? The business had changed. The leadership of the company I was so used to working for had changed. Their output needs had changed. The way they worked was so different. And I was lost for a long, long time. And
I remember being a part of these conversations, by the way, which is interesting to see you on the other side of it. Because I was coming in as you're like, are you sure you want to do this? Because it's crazy.
Yeah. Yes, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And also, I felt, I don't know if I felt gaslit, but thinking like, maybe I'm just done. Maybe I just have nothing more to say. And then I did Historia. It was incredibly well received. I sort of found a new love for the medium. Leadership changed again. And I was suddenly able to do this sort of work that I was so good at that I had not been able to do for a long, long time. And my thought about that has continued to be like, you just need to survive, right? If you're working in one of these businesses, the leadership is going to be what it is, and it's going to come and go, and sometimes it will last longer, sometimes it will not. There's going to be corporate mergers and, company shifts, and editors are going to come and go. But if you survive and you hold on to that thing that you know that you're good at, or in my case, like there's a certain kind of story and a certain kind of character I work at, you'll eventually get the chance to do it again. I don't know if that's entirely true for everyone, but that's how I feel. And it feels invigorating, again, to sort of come almost full circle. And I was curious if you think of that as being true in music.
Well, I mean, it felt like that in music in the same sense that we kind of started probably in a similar era, although you started a little bit earlier because you were super young when you started your comics career, and I was like well into my 20s, and you're a little bit older than me, but we don't need to get too into that, but just a bit, just couple, like 2 years, right? Couple years, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, kind. You're being very kind.
We're the same age, basically. Anyway. And so like when I was coming into the music industry and we, got a deal with a major record label, which was Universal Records, it was Polydor, which is a part of Universal, and that was a worldwide deal. So it was Universal worldwide. So everyone we were really dealing with were consistent people. There was a slight difference on the US side, but we were really a UK based band all over Europe, all over, the rest of the world, kind of dealing with this really known entity, these people that were there to support us. There was no change. There was no, kind of like really major changing of the guard at all during that time we were there, and we got to have a consistent, consistent backing in what we were doing. So I did see that. And then I saw the music industry kind of turn into this, oh, you can be a bedroom producer. You could be someone that puts out your own music. That was always a possibility, but it almost became the norm to kind of buck the system, start your own label, do a licensing deal, do it your own way, put out your own streaming songs the day that you make them, do whatever you kind of want to disrupt. So I did see it that way. I think there was probably some expectation coming into comics that maybe it hadn't had the same sort of implosion that music seemed to have had. I was maybe naive to think that. There are some still major players in publishing, but it sounds like there's a lot of change in the publishing industry as well.
There is. This leads to like a weird, maybe not a segue, but I'm curious. It just struck me that the thing that hit both of our businesses, like it hit the rest of the world, I'm not saying anything revelatory, it feels like the internet, right? So that is, I was just thinking about music. What allowed people to distribute music that they made at home is internet services, right? And like being online. And that's actually, I don't know if it's actually changed publishing the same way, but it makes me think about technology. This is a weird tangent, but you and I talk a lot about technology and what it does for business, what it does for art, what it does for humanity.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's an empowering mechanism for people, and it's something that allows them to, for both better and worse, bypass the systems that are in place. For the obvious, I think the good reasons are obvious. The bad reasons are less obvious, and that some level of quality control, gatekeeping, and it almost comes to something that I don't want to talk about, but like that idea of mentorship, that you have people that are experts in the industry, which I think, we of course live in a culture of cynicism about expertise. And I think,
yes,
we both come from careers where we had people that were real experts, established people that told us how to survive in these industries, and did that with, for at least me, a lot of criticism and a lot of positive criticism, kind of shaping us, and not just telling us what we wanted to hear, and seeing us as a financial opportunity, or even if we were a financial opportunity, we were a much better investment if we developed long careers that we became professionals in.
Yes, I talk about this a lot. I have been blessed over, particularly in my teens and 20s, with really incredible mentors. I think about this in many ways. Most of them were men, but they nurtured in me, and they saw in me ambition, because I was a highly ambitious kid for a variety of reasons. And they worked with me, but they were also really hard on me, which I appreciate in hindsight, because I also knew that they were hard because they knew, because they cared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that hilarious, like semi-famous, meme of Tyra Banks yelling on America's Next Top Model to that one girl, like, we only yell at you like this if we love you, if we believe in you. And those are the sorts of mentors I had. Like, even though it's a funny clip, that the idea resonates, because my mentors were freaking hard, and
right, and they wouldn't have bothered if they hadn't seen something in you.
Yes, and that's it, 100%. They wouldn't have bothered, and I know other people for whom they did not bother, but they worked with me, and they're like, if you just do these things, you can get work. You can get what you want, but you have to put your ego aside. You have to, listen, if you're angry at me, great, be done by the weekend, and then get back to the work, because once you do that work, then we can move you ahead. And I believe in mentorship because I had great mentors, and
that was one of the big questions I had for you on my little list of notes. But like, I think it's important because you were a mentor to me, and there must have been some genesis, right? Like, what's your origin story of you having the same experience? There must be, right? Like, of you having these people in your life that were pushing you, and also really interesting to me following you in your teaching career and hearing about some of the experiences you have now, where maybe in it's your story to tell, but kind of the idea that criticism is a sensitive topic, in teaching for a lot of reasons.
So that's really, really fascinating. So yeah, my secret origin, again, as I just stated, was probably from high school on, but even before that. I think because I was a dedicated, I was constantly drawing. I was always working at craft, but I'm slowing down because I was thinking about the reasons for that, right? It wasn't just out of love of drawing, although that was a huge part of it. And it was certainly out of love of storytelling. But at some point, when I realized I was gay, I came to understand that the one skill set that I had was this ability to draw narrative, to draw stories and pictures. And so I nurtured that because I believed it would take me from where I was to someplace else, right? Like this was my out.
I think a lot of people can relate. A lot of people can relate to that sort of escape fantasy based on working hard, finding what you can do, and that being your ticket on
Right.
to escape.
Although and this is a whole interesting segue, but I do wonder now in like 2023 how much of a motivation that is. I mean, I certainly think it is for many people for many reasons. For me, like in the 80s, I'm just thinking, contextualizing the time period, and I was living, I grew up in Southern California, but I went to high school in Orange County, which is a hyper conservative region, and I just knowing that I could not stay there, right? If I didn't
Right.
do something to get out, I couldn't. I would metaphorically die where I was. So, so what was interesting when I think about mentorship is that I had this drive from this sort of internal struggle that manifested in constant work. Like I had an amazing work ethic when I was young, and then my mentors seeing that in me and being like, wow, this kid's serious, and then helping me along. And again, they were everything from high school teachers and after school mentors to, I remember, God, I wish I could remember his last name. I've been looking for him for so long.
Mhm.
I had gone to a summer program at Otis Parsons in LA, and there was this teacher, an illustrator who like sort of whispered in my ear, like, this is what you need to do and this is where you need to go. And I think about him all the time. The head of my department at SVA, Neil Posner, the man that hired me at DC Comics, again, incredible men who took care of me and gave me space and taught me lessons. They were not easy on me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But when I started teaching, I think one of the ways I thank them was imparting on my students the lessons they taught me, right? So I teach very much the way I was taught. And what's really interesting right now, as you mentioned, is that in the past several years, education, particularly higher art school education, has become an interesting minefield of how to encourage and nurture students' artistic tendencies, desires, dreams, stories, but still enforce kind of practical skill sets that I actually think are useful in the real world, right? Like critique is a real battlefield right now because of these questions about honestly subjective truth. Like I can say something's good, someone can say it's bad, and who is right in the argument? And that goes back to our discussion about expertise generally, right? Like
Right, and then maybe they can pull away, sorry, to the internet and put their work online and say, look, my teacher said what I'm doing isn't great, but don't you all think I'm great? And everyone says, oh, you're great, and you can go find the answers where you want, instead of that sort of singular voice that maybe you really trust and sometimes hate that you trust, and that is telling you the truth, right?
Yes, but it is my experience currently that So I grew up on critique, both in art school when I was working at DC Comics and in the talent development group. I love it. I love exchange because I believe in critique as a teaching mechanism, especially when someone can identify a problem, but more importantly, identify a solution or offer a
Hmm.
solution, right? Because when critique comes from a place of like, oh, this is amazing. I think it could be better if, right? Like, can you imagine if you did this, it would make this 1,000 times more interesting, right? Like I love that exchange because I always love anything that will
But
elevate work.
sometimes the answer is this leaves me dead inside. This is not your best or something like that. And I think maybe that's what is a challenge to deliver sometimes. And you've been tough with me before. And I'm really glad you've been tough with me before because I don't think there's a more poetic way to say that sometimes. You never told me it makes you feel dead inside, you know what I'm saying? But you'll say I'm not feeling this. I just don't get it. It doesn't it's not speaking to me or it's not doing the things it needs to do. And that depending on your level of sensitivity, which if you're a creator, you're a sensitive person, probably you're already on that side of the scale. It can be really hurtful, even and it probably is never meant to be.
But the thing, if I can chime in with your work, so the one thing I will say about your work consistently from day one, and especially, so you were an incredibly prolific writer in like our first year of our group, and you generated so many ideas, one of which, as you know, is still one of my favorites because I felt so much while I read it. So your work was never bereft of emotion. As a matter of fact, your early work was actually full of melancholy, I would argue, and which is interesting considering that for those listening, we Scott and I formed a writing group like right at the beginning of COVID, and it was a way for us to connect as friends. It was also a way to use that time, as many people did, to try to generate work that we might not have had opportunity to do so
And don't
before.
and don't leave out actually the fact that I had expressed interest in writing, and it was your way of pushing me into starting completely.
Yes, yes,
Not
but
just be prolific, but I didn't even know what to do. So you kind of brought me in to say, what, you're just going to write something down, and we'll talk about it, and you're just going to try it and see what happens.
right,
Anyway,
and
yeah.
but the thing that but going back to like the feeling dead inside joke, right? So I have actually had students for, and I will say semi-joking, like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Tell me why it's so bad, right? Because I think using senses of humor disarms, and also addressing the elephant in the room, like, this is terrible. We know it's terrible. You're not terrible. Your artwork's usually great, but this isn't working. Let's make it work. Let's find out why it's not working, right? That's a favorite thing. But with you, what I love about your work, because I tend to respond, as you well know, to sort of emotional tenor more than anything else. And that's probably changed over the years, but like I want to feel something when I walked away. Um, and I will take messy and emotional often, and by messy I mean sort of maybe structural issues or whatever, over something that is sort of something that is incredibly structurally tight but but feels almost mechanical in execution. And your work is that perfect sweet spot. Like by the time you were on your second or third project, as you were figuring out again how the medium worked, there was emotional resonance on every page. I could feel you in the page, which I love, and I could feel emotion reading that work. But and then as you figured out structure and plot, like you figured out subplots and things like that, then it all came together. And what I still say that was so astounding is how quickly that happened. Like you were someone that just needed to literally do the work. And you were studying, you were reading a dozen different books, and you were absorbing information at a rate I've just not seen before. But also, like, in doing the work, I've never seen, like, you got exponentially better. Like every project just made more and more sense. The one thing I do remember is
Uh-oh.
uh no, 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 no. And because I think about this a lot, was the trick with you, I remember, was movement, right? Like physical characters moving, like getting them, because there was all this emotional resonance. There was thematic power, but it was sort of like, what are we looking at? So, like on the third chapter or something. And it was fun and sort of funny trying to encourage you to think about set pieces Like,
Mhm.
let's get some action in here. Let's get something collapsing. Let's get something moving. Um, and once you figured that out, you started to have fun with it and you got it.
You know what's interesting about that? I think about performance. I think about as a band, we would have a song and we'd tell our manager, "This is the best thing we've ever written. This is going to be a hit." And he's like, "Okay, go play it." And we'd play it in a show, and no one would react. And he
Wow.
knew, and he didn't even need to tell us whether it was good or bad. He's like, "Well, you're not going to decide that this is a hit. There are other people are going to decide whether this is a hit, whether it works. You're going to get the reaction." And the group is the way to sort of get that reaction, right? And I think what I saw is the more that you push me to incorporate movement, plot, structure, all these things, reading books about structure, understanding why our brains connect to structure in the way that they do, suddenly seeing a reaction and being like, if my goal here is to elicit emotion, if my goal here is to make people feel something, the death of a character can be just as good as some monologue I wrote, or some like you said, giant set piece coming onto the scene, being like, "Whoa, this is overwhelming. This is interesting." Like it adds to the experience, and then you see it working, right? You see it with the people you're around. Fortunately, if you have that experience, I mean, I think that's the only real way to judge your own work
And
is through other
the hope
people's
is
eyes.
100%.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. It's I know a lot of creators, a lot of my peers are like, we've talked about this sort of idea that you have to write for yourself primarily. And I think that's a
sure.
very popular idea. I think that Stephen King, I don't quote me, but I even think he talks about that a little bit. But I tend to write for a small group of people.
Mhm.
I don't just write for me. Clearly, like if I'm having fun, I'm really happy, but that gets to be a little masturbatory. I really like if I can show my work to like about 10 or 12 people, pardon me, like sometimes fellow creators, sometimes just fans, sometimes academics who I know and trust and who know me, know my work, and know what I'm trying to get at. And if they think it's a success or failure, I know I believe it, right? Like
Right.
if they love it or they're like, girl, what happened to this thing? Both those reactions I think are so important.
You have
So
to
I
take them
think
into account. You can fight it. You can have an argument, but it doesn't change the reality of what that work is, and it isn't going to change other
right.
people's reactions. You're not, as they used to tell me in school, like you're not there. I was in the creative writing program at Columbia, and I'm sure you're used to this, but you would have workshops where you're not allowed to speak, and you've got the whole class talking about your work, and they've gone completely off on a tangent. They don't get what you're doing, and you want to just jump in and say, "No, but I was trying to do this," and they're like, "Well, you're not going to be there when they buy the book off the shelf. You're not going to be there to do that. You have to put everything you want to put into that work into the work. You are not its advocate once it leaves your
That,
hands." And I think like that's really important, and it's the small group that is I think the way, because maybe one of the problems we have, I mean, this is like a bigger topic that we don't really need to get too into, but like we live in a current culture that looks at a very broad swath of reaction to know which direction to go. And I'm not right. I hope that a lot of people really get what I'm doing, but I can only target the kinds of people that I think would understand this work first. And if it
mhm.
goes beyond that, then it's fine. I don't have mainstream taste. I'm not necessarily a superhero guy. I mean, this. I feel like I'm almost a faker in this industry because I didn't follow superhero comics in the way that I did. But I love the medium and I love what it can do. So, we've almost forgotten, I think, maybe as a culture, that there is such thing as niche work. There's a such thing as
Mhm.
underground work. There's such a thing as work that may be discovered 10 years, 20 years after you write it. And that's okay too. I respect that kind of work. I look at that kind of work. How many discussions do we have in our group about this movie that was a complete flop in the 80s and then suddenly, it got a cult following 30 years later. It was marketed wrong and it actually was a masterpiece, or all these things. And I think we're so stuck in this moment of what is the criticism going to be? What is everyone around us going to say? What is the person who rejects your pitch at a publisher mean in the scheme of things? All those things are so hard to kind of tally up. But I think that idea, then I'm gonna like hold on to this. Like you're writing for you, but you're also writing for a group of people that you respect,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe that's what it is.
I think so, 100%. It's the other. There's a million ideas that I'm awash in now. One is the notion of niche and discovery and rediscovery. Because the other thing, the counter to that, of course, is stuff that you see at a certain age or read at a certain age. You're like, this is the best thing ever, and then you revisit it and you realize it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I do take a certain amount of pride in that most of the things I present from a period of time, I can still hold like I can still defend them. But
Or we can find that thing within those works that we're like, this is why. The rest of it, maybe the acting was bad in this movie. Maybe the script had some problems, but its ambition was there.
it does this thing that I still
Yeah.
think works even 20 years later. And that's the other. Oh, wait, you said something else that really struck. I'll come back to it, but it was. Oh, I know this is a funny sidebar, but I do think it's interesting the way we all tackle and think about genre. So I love superheroes. I came to realize a couple of years ago, and I think this was a big problem in my period of time when DC Comics was changing. New leadership had moved to Los Angeles. The new 52 came in. Everything I'd ever worked on had been wiped from canon, and so nothing I did technically mattered in this new publishing phase. And that was and it was a strange emotional cutoff. It wasn't even like I sat weeping in my face. It was just like, oh, okay, that's done. Like I just don't have any connection to this anymore.
I could be wrong about this too, but it almost like just thinking about myself in that situation, maybe it almost felt like a generational thing too. It's like, oh, this is being given to a new generation of creators, and maybe I'm not as relevant in this new format, which turned out to not be true for you. But I wonder if that was the part of the thinking.
I think it's part of it. I mean, there was other emotional stuff. My mother had died, and then my coworker Andy, my inker who'd been working with me for a decade, he moved on. So it was just a big shift all in the same year. So it's just like, okay, I'm done. But and it's I don't know why I'm bringing that up, except for the point that I wanted to return to was this thought about superheroes. Oh, I know. So coming back and doing Wonder Woman Historia, working the project I'm right now, I realized that in the search for what the sort of work I was to do, and I drew Transformers for a while, which was great, and a bunch of some indie stuff, which was fun. But the thing that got me into comics was superheroes. I really loved the sort of fantastical elements of that. I love the scale of superhero stories. I loved the soap opera of superhero stories. I really got into comics very specifically, not to draw comics, but to draw superheroes and Wonder Woman in general.
This was on my list very specifically, and I'm going to tell you why. But keep going with this. Yeah.
But one of the things I like to address with others, particularly, I did this teaching program at California College of the Arts during the summer, and none of my students were superhero people, which I love, 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 love. But I still think of many of their characters as superheroic or supra characters, right? Like, so I tend to think I have a fairly broad idea of what a superhero is. So in my head, Sherlock Holmes is a superhero, Indiana Jones is a superhero. Like any sort of character, no matter how human, if they're doing these really extraordinary things, I tend to find superheroic, right? Like if you are going after an ancient ark that literally holds like the sort of power of some biblical apocalypse, there's something superheroic about that. I remember talking to someone about Sandman, and while Sandman is super elevated, that group is still like a superhero team essentially.
Sure.
They're like brothers and sisters. They have code names,
family,
they have superpowers. It's a family, and so I tend to think more broadly about genre in many ways, I think, than others. And so what's really fun is teaching with and working with people who don't work in superheroes. I learn from them all the time about new and different ways to think about story, but even in like the indie stuff where there's supernatural elements, to bring over and be like, hey, I worked on a story like this in Wonder Woman, and here's some lessons that you can learn from that I learned. I really love the possibility of cross-pollination without barrier, right? So we talked about this a lot, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah.
About how like I really believe that if we're writing a horror book, we can learn a ton from like a soapy 19th century drama, because it's all still story, right? There's
Right.
still structure,
Right.
there's still highs and lows. Or if you're writing for a 19th century drama, you can learn a ton from Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Like people have these strange
I would actually argue that you should avoid learning from the same things that you're doing in the same genre that you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
100%, 100%. I'm just as someone who, as you know, I love hearing, and I'm using the word story quite broadly, but these are anecdotes, these are epics, whatever they are. Um, I love them across so many genres. Um, and I'm always troubled by seeing partitions where people are like, oh, this is this kind of thing, this is this kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing, this is this kind of thing. Clearly, taste and aesthetic and tone and all that stuff comes into play, and I don't mean to, but like generally, and I clearly have my own limits as well, but I really love it when creators specifically are pulling from all sorts of things. A TV show that they saw, and a reality competition show, and a really amazing, super emotional Oscar movie, and then this action adventure like if like I think there's lessons to be learned from all of it. And
Yeah, and I think we're both people who dig, right? I mean, we love digging
yes,
into the kind of like, under the surface, off to the side, in the bargain bin, wherever that stuff is. And I think it's so rich, and I just do wonder sometimes why. I mean, nothing against Marvel movies, but why do people look at those as the sole inspiration for what they're doing? There's so much more out there, and those things only came from more underground ideas. And I think if you're part of the evolution of all this, right, like it's almost your duty to dig further.
great.
That's my theory about it. It's a
I
duty.
would I would like to say that actually I think one of the most exciting things about you is what a digger you are. Like I was telling someone recently, because I talk about you a lot, like you're fun to name drop, but I talk about the things that I have learned from you over the past 3 years, and it's really a way of thinking. It's just sort of way of being open and less reactionary to certain things. But what you present to our writing group, or just what we exchanged in text, or even ideas, when we were Zooming or in person, you're pulling from so many sources, and you're like, I read this, and I saw this, and here's this interesting thing. And I talk about, as we talked about at San Diego Comic-Con, like you introduced me to this world, like this larger art world that I had no idea existed. You pull constantly. It's I think there are huge lessons to be learned from you about that,
But hopefully
because you're
not.
curious.
Right. Hopefully not a lot of other people learning the same lessons, because it's fun to have a world where not a lot of people care about these things and you're the only one that's caring about it. But
Right.
right. It's like it lowers the competition as far as I'm concerned. And there's no competition commercially for me. And I'm only an upstart writer and all these things. But in terms of me making a name for myself and carving out a niche, I'm very excited that I'm presenting I just like I'm at a certain age where I do feel like I have an aesthetic. I have what I love. I have what I love to do, and that's what I offer. I don't offer a superhero action piece, but if you're feeling moody, like sure, open up my book, and maybe we'll cry together or something.
Your books are absolutely a product of you, which I love. Obsessed, obsessed, obsessed.
Fortunately,
And
I can't do it any other way, so maybe that's a good thing.
yeah,
I've tried.
but also just spinning back, the thing that I think is really important is that you're a curious person, and I think like if that is a vital quality to have if you're a creative person.
Well, I'm actually going to bring it around on that note, and I appreciate that. I'm going to bring it to a note that I had, which was talking about origin stories, but also influence and the kind of person we are. I did happen to be that person who was a creative person. I had those mentors that were pushing me on, but I was playing music. I was a big reader. I loved, I love music, I love listening to music. I loved comic books. I love all this stuff. Love movies, love weird underground movies, love anime, all like the whole, the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
but I did not know where I wanted to be, or I wanted to be in all those places. It's so interesting to me that you are keeping a fire alive for a passion that you were completely laser focused on from an early age. And as you said, it wasn't just superhero comics, it was Wonder Woman. That was your goal. That was the end all be all. And you accomplished it at a very young age. And here you are with your first Eisner from a Wonder Woman book, which is incredible to me. But what is that like? Have your interests fluctuated? Have you? I feel like I've never known of a moment of you ever saying like, "Oh, I was just done with Wonder Woman. I felt like I had like seen everything there was to see." It's like this is the center of you. You've done a million amazing books, like, you know, amongst doing Wonder Woman. That hasn't been your whole life, but to you, maybe that's the center, and it's remained the center.
Yes.
Has it like? Have you needed? I guess maybe the question attached to that is: did you need to push to find something else that you needed to center in? I left a whole industry. I was just like, I'm fed up with this. I want to challenge myself. I want to do something new. I know you're writing a book that you can't talk about right now, but like you are, I don't think you can, but like you're challenging yourself in the same superhero world again and loving it and eating it up. So, you know, I admire that. I couldn't do that in music without walking away.
God, it's so funny that you say that. This opportunity arose. It's something that's been on my mind, and I had a support system that I had not had in many years saying, yes, we want to help you make this thing. I think Historia helped immensely. And I'm just reminded how good I am at that. The thing I wanted to say about Wonder Woman very quickly, and this gets slightly academic, but of course, like, you know, it's a little, you know, gay kid at 4. I see Linda Carter spinning. She becomes Wonder Woman. I'm clearly attracted to that imagery, that iconography. I loved that iteration of that character. I can talk about the episodes that made me love that character. I'm just just the timing of her presence in my life. Also, she was a character on the Super Friends. So I've loved that character since probably for 48, 49 of my years. The thing about digging in that character is I really come to realize what I love about that character, and it tackles two things I'm inherently interested in sociopolitically, and one is sex and gender, and one is war. And I won't get into it too much, except for that Wonder Woman at her best, when I was exploring her, my favorite runs of her, even the 1940 stuff, the two things they explore, that character talks about and explores, are sex, sexuality, gender expression, like, you know, literally, what is feminism, right? Like, what does it mean to be feminist? What does it mean? Like, what does sex mean? And, you know, all that sort of stuff is packed into that.
Women's roles as superheroes that have maybe been secondary to the male superheroes. I don't know. It sounds like it's rich, right?
It's all rich and it's all there. And then the other thing, of course, which it gets tackled less because it's less sexy, is war, right? So I've written papers about this. I've been published about, about, is war a feminist ideal? Is war a queer ideal, right? So if Wonder Woman is kind of the ultimate feminist queer icon, the reason I think I love her, and maybe even back when I was young, is that at her best, she tackles things that I think I personally resonate with me as sort of as a queer kid, as a, you know, I'd like to believe I'm a feminist person, but also as a sort of a human person in a world that is ravaged by this thing called war. And what does that mean, right? So I'm interested.
And then you come out with Historia, which I don't know if that was a lot of the conversation with you and Kelly Sue, but like this incredibly feminist story that, you know, you've talked about your connection to the you know, gender and feminism ideals in that book, but also a violent book.
A very violent. And Kelly Sue and I had lots of conversations about it. And I remember going to at least 2 female professors at NYU to talk about the material, and particularly talk about war and feminism, right? Because the sex and gender and stuff, and feminism, there's plenty of conversation about that, but it was this other thing that I was so interested in. So I'm going to wrap that up, but simply to say that I think the thing that continues to resonate with me with that character, and the reason I love working with that character in that world, is because those are issues that I think about just on a daily basis. And what Wonder Woman allows me to do is explore them creatively, visually. Like it's kind of just this weird perfect marriage of I have this I have this creative skill, a need for outlet. It happens to also be a real life job that I can have with an iconic character that is now forever going to be emblazoned on my tombstone, which is pretty exciting too. I have to say
And I would
that's really
say
nice.
what's so fascinating. I won't harp too much on this either, but we talk about the life of stories, which I'm super interested in. Discovering things years later, and you talk about even a book like this that you won an Eisner for. It was a well-respected book. It probably sold consistently. I'm sure you were happy with that. But then James Gunn discovers it and says, this is an incredible work. I can't believe how amazing this is. Wants to probably tie it into his whole world of things. And it's just like, oh, that's what a book that resonates with you. And I think about like going back to you and Kelly Sue probably having these, FaceTime conversations and just talking about an idea, talking about something that resonates with you personally. And then it kind of standing the test of time. I know it hasn't been a ton of time, but, after, when did it come out? A year ago? Over a year ago?
About a year and a half ago.
Right. So, and then suddenly it just has, it pushed it to number one on Amazon. Not to toot your horn too much here, but I'll toot your horn. It's like, yeah, like all of a sudden something that resonates continues to resonate, and it's no surprise, right? It wasn't a marketing idea. Like your Wonder Woman wasn't a marketing exercise. It was issues that you both wanted to address, which I think is really inspiring for me as a writer as well, because I'm always just wanting to pluck from the world. That's all I'm doing. I'm thinking about things and thinking about how they get put on the page or put in story, or what small thing I can add to that conversation. Right.
I think about that. I think about that specifically with your work all the time, because as I mentioned before, and you are so hyper cognizant of the world around us, and particularly issues of sort of technology and transformation. But the conversations that we've had just about humanity, right? There are two or three that resonate particularly, and to see that sort of manifested in your work is thrilling. Because your point of view is thrilling to me, right? So I am really, really excited about sort of the new work, and particularly the work that you're doing that kind of, I was going to say, F's with form, right? That sort of plays with the form of the medium itself, and then interjected with your worldview. I'm thrilled out of my mind for that stuff. Because
And
I feel like now, yeah.
No, sorry. I would say that part of that is selfish, right? Part of that is to keep myself entertained, because sometimes I get bored with the process, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? Stuff that excites me is hopefully going to excite at least one other person, right? But also the idea that form, which you've taught me a lot about form, and I continue to play with form is also part of the language that we use to tell a story, right? So we assume, I think change is the constant in the world that we live in, the creative world that we live in, but we assume there's some kind of format that is unimpeachable, right? But really what we're looking at is a form that didn't exist 100 years ago, at least nowhere close to what we're looking at now. And why shouldn't we continue to play with it, right? So maybe again, it's like a matter of duty to the medium to just keep playing and seeing what it can do.
Which I love, because my instinct is not to play with form. If anything, it is to double down on this. It's sort of most classic elements. Partially because that's fun for me, right? I like working in this.
But that to me is subversive too, in a world that maybe a lot of people are doubting the importance of form as well.
Yes, I agree. The stuff that I'm doing right now, I'm like, people haven't seen this sort of comic work in a long, long time, and it's clearly modeled on the stuff that influenced me. But I'm like, this is good, and I don't mean that. But I'm like looking like there was a time when this was normal. And what's interesting, right?
We both approach things with a certain amount of nostalgia, right? I mean, that's what we do. Yes. We look at a certain time that affected us. It may feel old fashioned, but to a lot of the world, the things we are feeling nostalgic about are completely new because they haven't seen it. That to me is exciting.
And I would go back to our sense of taste, right? So that I would argue, and maybe I'm not free of my nostalgia, though, that you and I, the stuff that we are looking at, we look at it with a with an aesthetic. Like, it's not just like, oh, this makes us feel good. It was succeeding in its way, right? The stuff that we like,
Yeah.
that we use as inspiration worked, and works now, right? Like, even and so we're basically just doing the updated version of that stuff because it was successful then. It's successful now. Like as an object, as a work, it might feel a little old fashioned based on what's coming out around it, but that doesn't make it any less successful.
Right.
As Yeah,
And what we are here to do is, I mean, Historia may feel like an old fashioned book for you in terms of the form and the sort of I don't know. There's maybe a sort of like a conservatism maybe about the way you approach panels and storytelling. I mean, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it also feels fresh, and it also feels fresh because you're bringing an update to your style in that book. You're bringing a real like ornateness to the style that we don't see a lot right now as
right.
well. So like it's a mix of all things. You created a new book. You didn't create an homage, just an homage to something old. And Kelly Sue's
No,
voice too. She's a new voice, right?
I
Yeah,
always say that none of that book would have existed without her. Like, every line I drew was sort of a dedication to what she inspired in me with that script that she wrote, which was just bonkers. Like, in our conversations, and so much of it was about her. And yes,
yeah, yeah.
I actually think that while the form, I was using very sort of traditional storytelling in terms of visual narrative and panel stuff, I think the surface aesthetic was elevated in a way a lot of people I don't think had seen. And part of that was just me needing to prove myself, like, again, after my weird several years of what am I doing and these up and down successes, I had this opportunity to come in and yeah, it was, I
Well,
wanted to be like,
you
no,
brought up
I can
another
still do this.
theory. You brought up another theory of art in general, which is maybe we're all just trying to prove ourselves, right? There's never a moment that I think I shouldn't say I shouldn't speak for anyone else. There's never been a moment in my life where I felt like, oh, I proved it. It's done. And I've had people say to me, if I had done what you did in that one particular moment, I'd be done. I would just hang it up and I'd go on vacation. I'm like, I don't know. It's like that drive isn't why I did it in the first place. And it's not why I would quit now. I constantly feel the need to prove myself. Maybe that's maybe that's on part two, right? Like, let's break into the psychology of why we're, constantly in need of some kind of validation. But,
But
that's a whole nother day.
it is, but on that note, I think you and I have talked about this, and I think it's a really interesting idea because we've talked about legacy. And so you talk a lot about the thing that you will leave behind is your work, which I think one of the reasons that matters to you. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and not just the work, right? I think we think about, people tend to, thoughtful people tend to think about this in terms of their life in general. But yes, I mean,
Hmm.
for me, it's hopefully something that I create that will stand the test of time. I hope. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I actually think I think about that whenever I think about the work that you share, because that conversation was profound to me, that idea. Because I think part of it was having the sense that one of my goals was to work on Wonder Woman, and I did. Right, that was a long time ago.
Right.
So
Right.
so I'm good with that, right? Like, my my legacies. I don't know what my legacy will be, but like
But you're still not satisfied. That's what's amazing to me about it, right? But it's not surprising. It's just that, like, you had the very clear vision. I didn't have the clear vision. I just want to do something that people will care about. You said I want to do this. You did it. But also maybe it's as much a testament to you as it is to Wonder Woman that it still fascinates you, right? That whole thing still fascinates you. The world around her still fascinates you, and what it says
right.
to the world.
Well, also when this is one of those things about be careful what you wish for. So when I finally got the chance to do Wonder Woman, there was a lot of editorial interference, and so the first year, it's a very up and down reading experience because I had editorial hands in all the time. And so I think probably on some level, I had been wanting to make up for that for 20 years, right? Because most people look at it like, there was an article that came out recently. It was like Phil Jimenez's Wonder Woman run is like the unsung run of like, I'm pleased that people look back on it much more fondly than they did when it was coming out, right? Like, I mean, the criticism of that book was heavy and harsh
Mm.
when that book came out. And some of it was valid, and some of it was rooted in the editorial changes I was being forced to make, and trying to navigate around. And I think, again, like, I'm happy for it. I'm glad I had that opportunity, but I think there's probably still the sense of, and I think Historia was this. I wanted to
Cleaning up
figure
a
out,
mess for yourself or something,
yes,
or cementing your contribution.
right. Like that, and kind of proof that if you leave me alone, or if you give me the right kind of mentorship and guidance, I will give you something amazing.
Right,
Stay
right. And
out
you
of
do
my
take
way.
criticism sometimes. But no, I'm sure
Sometimes.
you do. I'm sure
So,
you
no,
do.
no, no,
But
no, no.
you're a
So,
listener.
no,
You're not always gonna agree from my experience.
right, but I think that was it. Was just sort of, there was just a chunk of my career where there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and the stuff that I look at and I'm most proud of is the stuff where there were very few. And again, that my editors were mentors that nurtured me and pushed me, but didn't get in my way. And there's a lot of ego in that, but it was this sort of thing I was just like, I do know, if you just let me do this, I will make you and your company something amazing. I will elevate your brands. I will be happy. You'll be happy. Like, just let me do this. And I think there's a lot of
That's the
that.
consistent part to me of what we're always looking for as creators. I think of industry up and down, this and that, but that if you have that one champion that says, I'm going to criticize you, but I'm going
Yes,
to help you. I'm gonna bolster what it is that you do, and I'm gonna help elevate what you do. That's all we need, right? And it sounds like a small ask, but it's a rare thing to find. And I thankfully found a really good home for my first books that was, that allowed me to do, me and the other creators to obviously do what we wanted to do. So
and I have to say, nostalgia is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful first. I remember those first pages, and then to see it in print, it's a gorgeous work.
thanks. Yeah,
Like, it's a successful. It's so successful.
I got really lucky, and it's funny. Like Daniel Jaget, who drew the art, I got so lucky in working with him and the rest of the collaborators, Lee Lurich, who did the colors, but like also just the idea that I'm still on a digital run here, right? We have a physical to come. We have, more books in the future, and I should say that's next week, at least as we tape that WAG, my second series is coming out next week, and that'll be a monthly. And so like these things have lives, right? They, I don't even know what nostalgia is going to feel like when that comes out in print, assuming that all goes as planned. So, it's a funny one, but it feels good. And it's a journey.
I just want this on record because I've said it before. I think I said it at San Diego Comic Con, and I've told you. But one of the things I loved so much about nostalgia was how in the first issue alone, I could tell from the first five. The again, I use the word exponential with you because you get progressively better with everything you work on. Where you began and like those first couple of issues is like okay, and how you ended, the language that you were using in the narrative transforms through the issue. And I can feel you evolving from page 1 to page 24. I forget how long they are, but in a really beautiful way. Like because again, the first few pages, I'm like, okay, this is fine. And then I get into it and I am sucked into it. And I find myself sort of getting wrapped up in the lyricism of the language. And that was once I realized my reaction to it, I was thrilled because I knew that this was the right project for you, the right first project for you, and that you were really, really good at what you were doing. Like that you
Thanks,
knew
but
someone that knew.
or also you're sensing maybe my discovery of that thing the part of it that I really like to do, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm maybe okay with dialogue. I'm maybe okay with putting plot together. I'm just kind of figuring those things out a little bit more. But when I'm in a character's head that I get, that's where it's like actually just fun. It just kind of like flows, and hopefully, other people see that as well. But yeah, I just lean into that. I like it. It's the part that just feels like it's not work. It's just really fun to be able to do that.
Agreed.
So,
And I just love seeing it.
thank you. We're gonna I guess have to wrap it up. We're going on and on and on, and we could go forever. We'll have to do part two. We'll have to do part two at some point, maybe if they'll have us back. But any wares to hawk? I just hawked my new book, Wag, on ComiXology, by the way.
I'll tell everyone to go buy the Wonder Woman Historia trade paperback in hardback, because my fellow artist Gene Ha and Nicholas Scott did really. I mean, I gave them an impossible task, which was to follow up the stuff that I did, and they did. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful work, and Kelly Sue DeConnick wrote this incredible. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful work, and I feel like I'm talking about something that's been out again for a while, but like I'm proud of it. And then this other thing, which I think there's going to be clues to it announced probably by end of September.
That's exciting.
Keep an eye out. Yeah, I'm very excited. So,
and I have a bunch of scripts that are hopefully going to see the light of day and get made into books, and I'm working on that too. So let's make more books. Let's do that.
I'm very into this idea. Let's do that. Which means that we're going to have to shut up and go back and make our book.
Yeah, we got to do work.
I want to say thank you to Scott and Phil for this wonderful episode. Scott Hoffman and Juan Bobillo's Wag #1 is available now. And as always, thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time on Dynamic Duos.